I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more. Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
See, that's yes. That's the kind of attitude. That's the kind of can-do attitude we like around here. That kind of a liner gets. I'm just saying, we're giving that a 5 egg. Clearly, that deserves 5 eggs up, over easy. So, we have talked a bit about the massive Republican failures in terms of ISIS and the ISIS-K and Afghanistan, and we're going to leave, but we're going to, I keep expecting right before every Republican speaks, I feel like there should be this down now brick inside music joke, but it seems to be the same feeling that they have about everything. This idea that we should leave Afghanistan but stay. We should get our people out and our bases out and everything out, but stay and keep Bagram. We should negotiate with the Taliban except when Trump negotiated with the Taliban. And we shouldn't set a date for our withdrawal except when Trump set a date for our withdrawal. And we shouldn't extend that date capriciously until we extend that date to make sure some of our Afghan allies get out safely. We should get out every American, including the ones who don't want to leave. I don't know how that plan works. And we should do it by sending the military out into the streets with guns and tanks and Delta Force, Chuck Norris style, karate chopping their way through the streets to get Americans with dual citizenship possibly involved in the poppy trade that don't want to leave so that they can be brought home safely to organize an opium trade here in America. America first business practices.
He doesn't love a poppy.
Yeah. So it should be no surprise that their attitude towards the Taliban is almost identical to their attitude towards COVID.
Yeah.
You shouldn't negotiate with it. You shouldn't let it run wild. You should attack it with everything you got, except not. And in the right now, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, who is currently, I think he finally tested negative rather, after 4 days. By the way, big love to Paul Stanley, who is vaccinated but got a breakthrough case and is weathering it well as just, kind of fluish symptoms. He's doing all right. We love him, but they had
the whole crew, the band, even Gene Simmons, who was a Fox News alum, is speaking out against politics involved and said, follow the science.
Yep.
Everybody's got both vaccines.
Yep. Which is why, you're allowed to have, that's why we can speak across the aisle to some people. Just because parts of their groups are lunatics does not mean you can't engage with the ones that aren't. That's my point. So
right. I think we both said this before. I miss real Republicans.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can talk to them and negotiate as long as, everybody was getting something. Like compromise existed.
Yeah. And it had to, because we have a democracy, not a vacillating dictatorship, which is not the goal. Never has been. So Abbott is deploying 2,500 out-of-state medical staff, also known as calling for help, to deal with their COVID surge right now because of the Delta variant through the state. They requested external assistance 2 weeks ago when Abbott announced that 2,500 out-of-state medical workers were needed to respond to the Delta variant. COVID patients are now taking up more than half of all intensive care beds in Texas as of Thursday, compared with 30% nationwide, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Let's see. The medical personnel and equipment deployed by DSHS will provide crucial support to our healthcare facilities as they treat hospitalized cases of COVID-19. Alabama's health officer says, and I quote, I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to do this. They are, he gave his COVID-19 update, and basically he started breaking down. And then in California, where we've got this recall election going on, by the way, vote no if you're within the sound of my voice and that election applies to you in any ways. I did. And the top running Republican right now, Larry Elder, is going to be charged with domestic abuse by his ex-wife. That charges are now filed, which I think is how you determine a Republican frontrunner, if I'm not mistaken. You cannot be a Republican frontrunner in any race unless you have a current domestic abuse charge or several charges of sexual assault. It's just, I mean, do you even MAGA, bro? You need that. That's part of your bona fides. Remember, they used to be the pro-life family values crowd, but right now, one of the things that might affect materially, statistically significantly, the recall election and the choice to kind of toss Gavin Newsom out of office and replace him with a Republican that can get only 6% of the vote, couldn't be elected to statewide office in a real election. Those folks statistically are losing voters left and right, not because they're giving up on voting because Donald Trump told them to, which is also a significantly large number of folks. No. That's because mortuaries are filling up and hospitals are clogged in rural California towns with low vaccination rates. In Crescent City, California, the mortuary is filled beyond capacity and needs a refrigerator truck to hold bodies. Pro-life, family values. The small hospital is so full that it is lining up helicopters to fly COVID patients out of remote Del Norte County. So many employees are out with coronavirus infections that businesses have closed, not because they're worried about the spread, but because the business owners themselves are currently sick with COVID. Can't come into work. Not, oh, I'm worried I don't want to spread it. They don't care about that. They can't get out of bed. They're having trouble breathing. They'd be in the hospital, but there's no room for them. So they're convalescing at home until they die at home. And someone goes, well, they would have died of something anyways. You got to die of something. We'll be back right after this news break. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega, worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Fuss-faced little pimpstick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
In the break, we started having a great conversation about, the politics of economics. And my feeling is that most of the discussions that we've been having about economics over the last 10 years even don't actually apply to the material reality we all live in now. Because when concepts of capitalism and Marxism and socialism and those kind of things were created, there was less than 1.5 billion people on the earth. And all economies were resource economies. Limited amounts of stuff, meaning oil or food, and land for arable land for farming. And some people had it and some people didn't. Now that you have an idea economy that drives a good portion of the world, or even the economic world building money in and of itself, from the evils of credit default swaps to the positives of lower middle class people can invest through Robinhood into and grow their money like robber barons 100 years ago could do, but no one else had access to. There's a different conversation that needs to be had about economics, and I think it's worth having. And I love that the second I bring it up, our chat room comes alive with discussions about it, and it's a great thing. Period. It's awesome because that's how it should go. Yeah, let's get rid of robber barons for good. Somebody said we don't have any really. We really don't. We don't. Robber barons were pre-stock market in a lot of ways. They were single. Trump is a robber baron, I think, is the closest thing to a robber baron that we know of and interact with in these days. Small family business, not publicly traded, avoids taxes and all kinds of stuff by being part of an industry overall, the New York real estate market, which is rife with corruption. And it's so corrupt that everybody's afraid to go after any of the corruption for the sake of the whole thing falling apart. Trump thinks he's a protected class in the world because somehow he's escaped all of this scrutiny, as if it's personal, as if everybody's afraid to go after him. And the reality is they're just afraid to go after anybody in the New York real estate market, because the minute you do, it's so mobbed up and gacked up with Chinese and Russian money and shady Saudi deals that if you start pulling that thread, the whole sweater comes apart. And New York winters are cold. Just saying. So we were talking about this. The Alabama health officer is saying, I don't know how much longer they can hold out. And we have reports now of there was a story about doctors walking out because they were sick of unvaccinated people clogging up the things and wearing them out. Those doctors, for the record, did not walk out. They made a stand. They were protesting during their breaks in their shift. So they went right back to treating unvaccinated COVID people after coming out and giving statements about how horribly they're being treated and the horrible situation that they are going through. So increasingly, you're seeing nurses as well who are walking off the job or quitting or simply collapsing from exhaustion because the Delta variant is surging through areas where people took no precautions. Now, in one of the things people forget, it seems, that Trump was wandering around going, we got 14 cases, it's going to soon go to 0, right? That was the whole story. We got 14 cases, and he didn't even want to bring a cruise ship full of with 68 Americans on it to port because he knew he would have to offload those 68 Americans, and that would add 68 people to his number of cases in the country. Not dead. These weren't corpses. He didn't want to add 68 to his number of 14. So he was stiff-arming Americans trapped on a boat as the disease spread, who may or may not have, by the way, had it, who were stuck there as they got it, right? So, and then what did that lead to? That led to millions of cases and over 600,000 deaths in the United States. 14 led to 600,000. The Delta variant is more virulent, can break through with thank God, non-hospitalizing infections, but can break through and make people ill and spread the virus to people who aren't vaccinated or who aren't taking precautions. And there was one upside to the death count last year, is that largely people who were at all concerned about their breathing, their oxygen levels, or any of that kind of stuff were rushing to the hospital and getting treated. And as hard as it was to treat them and as how limited the treatments were, they still could. And some people were in the hospital for a short time, never needed to be intubated, and were released. The problem they have with the Delta variant and where it's striking right now is that you have a tremendous number of Republicans who don't believe it's real, didn't take any precautions, aren't vaccinated, won't wear masks. They get sick. They think it's nothing. They think it was a hoax. And then they wait until their lungs are nearly shut down before they ever go to the hospital when it is too late. So to the folks who don't believe in science and don't believe the doctors and don't believe in vaccines, who are rushing straight to the hospital as soon as they can't breathe anymore, tell you what, rush a little sooner. Get yourself checked out. And so I had a friend, he's not one of my brightest friends, but who got COVID and was was a vaccine holdout. And not a denier, but a wait and seer, right? And yeah, right, in quotes. Roommate of his got COVID. He decides, oh crap, I better get vaccinated. The day that the other guy comes home sick, breathing all over him, saying I'm sick. So he goes and gets the vaccine. He sets up an appointment, super easy, right away.
Yeah.
Races to the CVS, gets a shot of Pfizer. The very next day, sick as a dog because he'd caught COVID. And the vaccine is not a prophylactic that operates that way. It's not the morning after pill for COVID. And over the course of 2 weeks, he went up and down with it. First, it's like the flu a little bit, and then, wow, I'm fine for a whole day. And then, bam, harder. And then about 5 days of, wow, this is the worst flu I've ever had. And then, hey, I'm better. And then, oh my God, I don't think I can breathe. Steaming every day, trying to breathe, dry cough because it's, and while he's telling me this story, he's like, you know, you're not coughing up anything and it's not green, so it's not pneumonia. I'm like, it's COVID. Your lungs are shutting, dum-dum. That's from the swelling. It's a dry cough because there's nothing in there to cough out. That's your own tissue. That's your lungs swelling shut. And, you know, luckily, this guy was healthier than most, goes to the gym, and didn't have any kind of surprise comorbidities that made it turn south. But he was this close and was well past the point where the hospital would have helped if it had taken a turn for the worse. If he'd have gone to the hospital because he just got to that point where he couldn't breathe at all from the exhaustion of not being able to breathe, which is what happens. It's like drowning people. They just don't have the strength anymore, and all they do is sink. You're at a certain point, you only have limited energy. Your lungs can only expand and contract so many times. And if the work is too much and the exchange becomes too bad, where, you know, it's taking 1,800 calories to lift your fork to your face, but your meal only has 800 calories per bite, eventually there's an overlap. There's a return on investment that fails. And that's what happens to a lot of these folks. And then they get pneumonia, viral pneumonia on top of it. And then they're gone. Then they tube them, they try to drain stuff out, but it's really a matter of just watching their lungs swell up as their lungs start to react to the fighting off COVID, and now there's pneumonia. So your immune system overreacts initially to the COVID and then tries to fight pneumonia at the same time. That's how it goes. And then you're dead. Then you can slowly but surely drown in your own lungs. And it's horrifying that this is how hundreds of people are dying. And in these rural towns in California, which are the only parts of California that are having any, material failures of the COVID response, because they are choosing not to be involved in the COVID response. And so every blame about why we keep having to vacillate through lockdowns and why we have to put masks on to save the MAGA folk from themselves, because if any of us are carrying it but have been vaccinated and we can expel the virus, but we don't, we don't fear having to go to the hospital, but we don't want to give it to people who aren't vaccinated. So we're protecting them in a way that they're not willing to protect themselves. That's Gavin Newsom's fault. That's why we need a recall. Meanwhile, who's dying in these rooms? People who signed the recall petition, that's who. People who are voting for Larry Elder or wanted to before they were intubated. It's heartbreaking. No one should have to die in this country simply because you're an idiot. And I do not and will not celebrate the Darwinistic deaths of these folks, and I will not wish greater illness on any of them. Because the ones that do recover and recognize that they were telling themselves a lie can be some of the best advocates for saving other lives before it's too late. And everyone around them isn't necessarily 100% on board with their BS as they bring this disease home. That and wishing that on anyone also wishes that, by hook or by crook, the tangential deaths that will be caused by it. So no, always no. You're not going to hear it from me. You're not going to hear me welcoming it. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. 773-763-9278.